Welcome to DEFCON 3. I'm KT McFarland. Iraqi forces are starting a new offensive to push back ISIS terrorists in the country's Anbar province. Militants lost control of a key oil refinery on Saturday, and they were brought to a halt in their effort to take further control over the town of Ramadi, Iraq. Well, here to discuss the latest developments on the battlefield are Paul Floyd from the global intelligence and advisory firm Stratfor and Foreign Policy Initiative's David Adesnik. Welcome, gentlemen. David, let me turn to you first. What's behind the ISIS offensive?
Well, I think right now ISIS needs to push back. And I should say first, thank you for having me back on the show. Last week there was a completion of the battle for Tikrit, which is best known as Saddam Hussein's birthplace. And after an initial assault failed where Iraqi forces were supported by Iranian-backed militia, U.S. airstrikes helped them take the town. And that was a significant defeat. It was really the largest military move by the government forces so far. So ISIS needs to reassert itself.
Let me turn to you, Paul. You've served in that theater. Is ISIS going to be able to make gains, or is the Iraqi army going to be able to stop them and check their advance?
ISIS still controls a large amount of territory both in Iraq and in Syria and has a lot of resources because of that. And so we should fully expect ISIS to continue to do counteroffensives in this kind of broad battle and broad war in various places, both in northern Iraq and in Anbar province.
David, is this sort of a back-and-forth stalemate? You know, ISIS advances, Iraq advances, going to go back and forth for the foreseeable future? What do you think, David?
It could be. A big factor is going to be how much the United States invests itself. What we already know is that Iran has been heavily invested, that it directly funds, supports, and sometimes even operates the militia that are a key part of the fighting force. For example, in the first assault on Tikrit, 2/3 of the people who took part in that were in Iranian-backed militias. Only a third were actual Iraqi troops. And the question for the United States is, are we going to come in with more than occasional airstrikes? We've waged a relatively lackluster campaign. I think the White House has been hesitant to commit, hesitant to admit that its previous approach to Iraq was a failure and it needs to step things up. So a lot of this is going to be answered in the White House.
You know, let me turn to you, Paul. David's got a really interesting point, that Iran has been the main supporter of the Iraqi military, and with a little bit of assistance from the United States. Does Iran continue to have a major role in this fight with Iraq against ISIS, Paul?
It does, where it can. I think we saw the limits of Iranian support in a place like Tikrit, where the United States had to step in with coalition air support to actually get the battle moving again and ultimately win that battle. But Iran is, helping manage manpower and training, but that has its limits, especially in places that are more Sunni-dominated, sectarian-wise, in a place like Anbar province.
You know, David, when you say, well, the question now is what is the White House going to do? Are they going to continue, or are they going to step up their support of Iraq? Do we really want to be in the situation, as some would say, that we've become Iran's Air Force? Do we really want to marry up with Iran militarily to defeat ISIS? What do you think, David?
No, absolutely not. They cannot be trusted. Their goal is not just to defeat ISIS, but to exert control over Baghdad, which they were doing quite successfully after the precipitous U.S. withdrawal in 2011. We have to take the tougher objective of trying to rebuild an Iraqi force that can secure the country without being subordinate to Iran. And that's not undoable. It's tough, but not undoable. That's part of what Tikrit showed, that after the initial assault failed, supported mainly by Iranian militia, what happened is then the Iraqi forces went back in, and it was clear that the Iranian-backed forces had to stay on the side, and then with U.S. air support, the goal was achieved. So this can be done. It just requires more support than we're giving now.
You know, Paul, you're a veteran, and as we all watched over the weekend that General Dempsey, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, in talking about the strategic value of the fighting that's now happening in Iraq, he said Ramadi doesn't matter. He meant it in a strategic sense, but that has caused a firestorm, especially of veterans and families of veterans. Debbie Lee, a friend of mine, whose son was the first Navy SEAL to die in Iraq, and he died in the Battle of Ramadi, and she came out and said, General Dempsey, how can you say this, that it doesn't matter? My son's blood is in Ramadi, and you're now saying that Ramadi isn't. Why did he die then if it's not so important? I mean, Paul, how do you react to what General Dempsey said?
On a personal level, I understand the reaction, having fought in Ramadi myself and being stationed there at times. the kind of emotional appeal of saying we don't want to sacrifice, having sacrificed for nothing in Ramadi. That being said, to General Dempsey's comment, I partially agree in the sense that you kind of have to divorce your emotions from what you're doing as a military strategy. And what he's saying is that Ramadi is a small piece of a much larger battle. And in that sense, I agree. Ramadi cannot be the sole focus of this fight because of past things that have happened there.
David, I'm going to give you the last word. What do you think of General Dempsey's comments?
Well, I think that Mrs. Lee spoke well to how that has an emotional impact on those whose sons and daughters made sacrifices. And I would just add, from a military perspective, a civil war like this, a counterinsurgency, it's a war for the population. Ramadi is a provincial capital in the Sunni area, which is the one that has been the homeland for the insurgency, both when the United States was there and now again. If the new government can't reassert control and rebuild its bonds with the population there, it's unlikely that the overall campaign would succeed. So I think just on a strategic level, General Dempsey's comments were not really right on.
Well, thank you both for weighing in on the personal and on the strategic value of the Battle of Ramadi and the entire fighting that's going on in Iraq and Syria today. So, Paul and David, thanks. Check out foxnews.com for more on the fight against ISIS. I'm KT McFarland, and thanks for watching DEF CON 3.